Hello everybody and welcome to another photography talk, and this time I want to talk to you about the mirrorless versus the reflex camera. Before we begin, as usual, if you want to support the channel, please put a like, subscribe, share with your friends. If you want to go a step further, check out my books. You can see here on my website, and one of them is the Photography Dev Manual, everything about the basics of photography. There's another one that is about fine art printing, and a novel that is quite beautiful with a photographic theme. I was reading on Facebook in a group that is Pentaxians, so it's made for people using Pentax. The usual debate, reflex versus mirrorless. And by the way, it's quite impressive that on groups dedicated to Pentax, and Pentax made the decision to not follow the mirrorless trend and stick with the reflex. And it's impressive to see a lot of Pentaxians, they call themselves Pentaxians, that are upset because Pentax is not going mirrorless. And this is for me quite fun, because if you want a mirrorless, there's really a big market for that. Everybody is creating mirrorless, so why do bother and hope that a brand that decided to stay philosophically on another system will change? So this for me is is kind of absurd. But reading these kind of comments talking about yeah, Pentax must change to mirrorless and with all the advantages of the mirrorless and so on, it came to my mind the idea that is the reflex versus the mirrorless is not just a technical thing. So I wanted to do this video and tell you my opinion and why I still like to use a reflex camera. And by the way, the great thing about the free market is that we don't have to be all equal and uniform. You can have people with different tastes, with different opinions, and still have someone producing the thing. So that's something that is fantastic, and I really lately cannot stand this idea that everybody must be equal and have the same tastes and all the same things. Really, I don't care if someone prefer an electric car or a diesel car or a gasoline car. The good thing is that everybody can do what they want and can find a market for that. So that for me is the most important thing, is the freedom to choose. But talking about the reflex, there are, first of all, here I'm assuming that everybody knows what is a reflex and what is a mirrorless. But just to get the thing straight and short, a reflex camera is a camera that has a lens, a mirror that projects the image on the focus screen, and you can see exactly what is outside through the lens. You can see the subject through the lens projected on a focusing screen, and this is really something nice. And by the way, it's very easy to see with Hasselblad, because you can see this is just a box with a mirror and the focusing screen on the top. So this is kind of the idea of the reflex. When you take the pictures, the mirror goes up, so the image can go through the lens on the film or on the back, digital back, if you are shooting digital. And that's the thing. When you take another shot, the mirror goes down and you are ready for another shot, and you still see this beautiful image on the focusing screen. A mirrorless system obviously is different. Through the lens, the image goes on the sensor, and the sensor is always active, so you see an image on a screen that can be the LCD on the back of your camera, or inside the viewfinder there's another LCD that projects the image, so you can see the image inside. But the image that you see is something that is already elaborated by the sensor. In case of a reflex, what do you see? Also, if you are on a digital reflex, you see the real image that is your subject without any filtering. And that is for me the greatest difference. It's the greatest difference because with the mirrorless, in a way or another, in the viewfinder I see an image that is already manipulated by the camera. Usually what we see on the screen is something that is a low quality version of the image. It depends on your camera, the power of your camera, the quality of the screen inside. Obviously here is a low level Fuji X-T20, but if you get a high level camera the quality is much better, but still it's an image that is already elaborated. So you are not seeing the reality and thinking, now I transfer the reality in my camera and do it with your mind. The process is something that is with your mind, is you that are visualizing a reality and thinking how it can become an image on a sensor or on a film. But with the mirrorless you see already an image converted by the sensor and by the camera. And by the way, being what you see, an interpretation, you don't see, for example, all the potential of the raw file and all these kind of things. You see basically a converted JPEG. So this is something that you must consider. And for me, to see something that is already elaborated by the camera is something that I don't like. I like to have my mental process doing the transfer from the reality to the image. I want my mind to figure out how is the shine and how I want it converted in the camera, in the image. So I select the exposure and everything else, and I already know if I want to sacrifice, for example, if the subject is out of the dynamic range, I want to sacrifice the shadow or the highlight and all these kind of things. It's something that for me is important to not have a filter. With the mirrorless, this is absolutely impossible. What you see is what the sensor sees, and you don't see exactly what the sensor sees. By the way, you see low quality JPEG and interpretation of what the sensor is seeing. And that is something that I don't like. For example, when I see through an optical viewfinder, so a reflex system where I see everything as it is in the scene, I can adapt my mind to what I consider the color balance. My eyes will adapt in that way. So I see, for example, a sunset, I know exactly in my mind the colors I want to see in the sunset. If I use a mirrorless, what I see in the camera are the color interpretation of the camera based on the color balance that I set up and all these kind of things. And I hate to have to stop and think, okay, now I have to change the color balance of the camera, I have to change this, I have to change that, and so on. There's always something that the camera interprets, and for different situations, usually you want to see different interpretation. And that means to have to think constantly about the camera. Something that the pro mirrorless people think is very positive is that the autofocus on mirrorless bodies is more precise and fast. And this is for a simple thing. If you have a reflex, the autofocus must have a sensor that measures the autofocus and all these kind of things. If you have a mirrorless, the autofocus is measured directly by the sensor. So that can be really nice because, for example, when I converted my Fuji X Pro 1, and you can see the video here, to infrared, it's fantastic to have the focus made directly by the sensor, because infrared focuses at a different point than the visible light, but being on the focus directly on the sensor, no matter if you're focusing infrared light or visible light, the sensor will always put the sheen in focus. If you use a reflex, for example, you have to convert the focusing sensor in the camera to kind of have the infrared focus and this kind of thing. So it's more complex. There are advantages to have this ability to focus on the sensor. The same is with the exposure. With exposure, the camera can read exactly what is in the sensor, so if you select to keep the highlight, you are sure that the camera will expose don't having any pixel going overexposing the highlights and so on. So there are some form of easier precision, but this in my opinion is very good for some people, and in some situation for me it is not. I really like to have an optical and not a digital view of the scene. Yes, that's the exposure can be more precise, but seriously, I never had problems with the exposure system in the reflex cameras. It's really just a matter of attention. And by the way, talking about exposure, there's something that for me is very impressive that probably is a problem of the digital sensor that don't have that much latitude, or I don't know what. But when I did an assignment with something as this camera, it was very simple. Imagine something as a wedding. I didn't do much weddings, it was not my bread, but imagine to do, for example, a wedding. You have a situation. You are outside in a field, beautiful tree, groom and bride below the tree, and you take pictures. It's very simple. If you have a camera like this, you measure with an exposure meter, you measure the light on the sheen, and you just take pictures. You don't change the settings, don't change nothing if you are not changing the situation, the light situation. When I use mirrorless cameras and digital cameras in general, something that is quite impressive, especially with mirrorless cameras, is that every single shot that you take, the exposure changes. The settings are changing. You just go a step further or a step back and everything changes. You just change the frame a little bit and everything changes. And that is something that for some people is positive, for me is a pain in the rear, because I like, when I have the sheen, I like to have everything uniform. And I know that sometimes, perhaps if I'm doing imagine the sheen of the wedding I said before, if you're doing more close up on the faces of the groom and bride, you can have a little bit different exposure, because if you get back, for example, there's the light in the background and these kind of things. But I exactly want the same exposure if I go closer and I go further from the subject when I'm doing a sequence. And the problem is that, yes, you can use kind of the cameras in a manual mode, but is not the same. There's always, on the mirrorless especially, there's always some setting getting in the way. It can be the dynamic range setting, I don't know, there's always something, and every time I have to go to all the menus and really understand what is wrong with that. So that's something that it depends. If you like the camera to do everything, to control the situation, go with the mirrorless. But if you like to have more control on your photography, absolutely a reflex is much better, because a reflex gives you that mental process to be in control of what you are doing, and you don't have to trust the camera. So that's something that is absolutely different. And by the way, there are here I'm showing an Hasselblad that is a very manual camera with no exposure meter and so on. But for example, I used a lot the Pentax MZS, that is kind of a more modern camera, film camera, but more modern. You can go a review here. And that camera was absolutely precise with the exposure meter. That was fantastic. All the automatic things that were great. So no problem to use automatic features also with the reflex. I understand the mirrorless if you are doing something as sport photography, very fast action, you want to do the 30 frames per second and all these kind of things. It's not the style that I like. I prefer a more meditated photograph, but yes, I can understand use of mirrorless for that. For the normal photography, I see people doing very slow photography like panoramas, landscape and all these kind of things, and you think why do you need a mirrorless? And I saw a lot of amateurs. By the way, I know a lot of professionals that stayed with their reflex camera and they are not upgrading the system because they don't want to go mirrorless and they have all the reflex cameras. So I know a lot of them. But I see also a lot of amateurs that are kind of fixated with the technology, with the improvement of technology, and they get mirrorless camera, spend a ton of money to get a mirrorless system, and by the way, they only do landscapes or this kind of subject 99% of the time. And if you are taking pictures of a static subject without the need to be very quick, there's really no reason to spend the money if you have a reflex system to spend the money to go to a mirrorless system. So there are pros and cons on both the situation. Personally, again, I love the optical viewfinder, so I love the reflex, and I really cannot stand much the mirrorless systems. I find them too intrusive in my viewing process. So it's always in the middle, and I don't like to see the interpretation that the sensor gives of my image. I want to see the reality that is there. I want to see the reality and think in my mind how it will translate in a print. But another point that is the most important for me is that choose what you prefer and don't care about the trend. Right now it's trendy to go with mirrorless because everybody's doing that, because every company is starting to produce mirrorless and so on. All the advertise, all the commercials are about mirrorless, but try them. It's very easy. You can find, you can borrow from friends, you can rent them, you can just try in a shop if you are buying something, and try the difference. If you are a new photographer that always had mirrorless, go to rent a Pentax K1 or K3 and absolutely try the reflex experience, and then you decide. And if you always had reflex cameras, rent or borrow a mirrorless camera and you can try. And you can decide for yourself what fits your vision. We have not to forget that the cameras are not what create the image. We are creating the image. The cameras are just tools. And as tools, we have to choose the tool we prefer. And it's the same thing in every aspect of our life. And that's why I'm really don't like right now that there's this trend to uniform everybody. And we see it a lot with cars. That is, I don't know, in the rest of the world. Here in Europe, you look at the cars right now, are all equal and the same. Yesterday I was seeing an SUV by Maserati and I was thinking, holy cow, another SUV. And also Maserati, instead of continuing to do this beautiful sport car, is doing this kind of SUV, and all looks the same. From some distance you cannot distinguish them. So this is ugly. The good thing about the human being is that we are all different. We like different things, we enjoy different things, and also in photography we like different things, and what you want to achieve is your own vision. And to achieve your own vision you have to use tools that are right for your own vision and don't are in the middle of your vision. So in my case, for example, something as a mirrorless with an electronic viewfinder is just too much in the way of my vision. For other people can be totally different, and they can hate the reflex because for their vision the 30 frames per second is essential and so on. We are different, and that is great. By the way, did you ever notice that all the people talking about the biodiversity in insect, the things that you have to save 10,000 different species of mosquitoes, annoying mosquitoes, and these kind of things are the one that usually pushes a uniform human being. I'm for biodiversity in everything, included the human being. It's so good that we are all so different, and we can express something different, and we use different tools. So if you like the reflex, buy a reflex. There's Pentax still doing it, and you found one. If you like mirrorless, don't bother companies to convert to mirrorless. Go to buy the mirrorless. Everybody's doing mirrorless right now. So just think of the tool is why you need to have this I want to be loyal to a brand, but the brand must do something different for me. This is just BS. I mean, a tool is a tool. Who cares about the brand? I never cared in my life. I always loved Pentax because I had a vision that was very similar to what I had. When Pentax didn't have that, I switched to Canon because I needed full frame digital. I had no problem to do that. I switched back. I went to Fuji. In film, I was Hasselblad. I was Pentax. I was other kind of cameras. I was large format with all different things. So you just need the right tool for you. Who cares who is the producer, and who cares about the brand loyalty and so on? So try one, try the other, and let me know what you think about this. Just write down in the comments, and I'm always happy to listen your opinions. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.